Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Marshall Smith from the Kenosha Writers Guild. To date, the Kenosha Writers Guild has produced 10 YouTube videos of local writers reading their work, which you can view by searching Kenosha Writers Guild on YouTube. Now, Kenosha Writers Guild is bringing you a series of readings with a theme. Today's theme is family. We have asked several published writers to read. They are Darleen Coleman, Bob Katzman, Dave Gourdoux, Joe Engel, and myself.
I have a minor fascination with numbers and number sequences and riddles about numbers. One of my favorite number riddles is known as Zeno's paradox. Take 2 points on any number line, and then halve the distance, and then halve that distance, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, and so on, and you go on to infinity. In other words, there are an infinite number of measurements between 1 and 2 inches, for example. Yet we can see by looking at a ruler that there is a finite space, 1 inch, between the 2 points. How can this be? What are the implications? Who cares? Unfortunately, there's a sad turn of events that has me thinking about Zeno's paradox tonight. I think I'm beginning to understand how the infinite can exist within the finite. My father, Larry Gourdoux, passed away today. This morning, about 9:45, I called my dad on his cell phone. He answered, and I could hear that he was in a public place. Our connection, as usual, wasn't too good, and we quickly got past the hellos. "Where are you?" I asked. "At the post office," he replied. "How are you feeling?" "I'm in a hell of a shape," he said. "I'm feeling dizzy." I detected a trace of fear in his voice. "You better get yourself in," I said, meaning in to see a doctor. My dad's had some serious health issues the past few years and suffered from congestive heart disease, as well as an abdominal aneurysm. At this point, our call was disconnected. I tried calling him back a second and then a third time with no answer. I then called my sister, and she called the director at my dad's senior complex and asked her if she could drive the 3 or 4 blocks over to the post office and see if her dad was okay. We waited about half an hour and then got a call, first my sister, then me, from the Rusk County Sheriff's Department. The deputy informed us they had taken Dad to Ladysmith in an ambulance. They had no more information at that time and called back as soon as they could tell us something. I asked the deputy if Dad was conscious when they took him, and he replied no, he was not. So my sister in Oshkosh and I in Pleasant Prairie waited nervously for a call back. Finally, around noon, my phone rang. It was my sister. They sent an Oshkosh policeman to her door to give her the news that her dad had passed away. The next few hours were spent making and answering phone calls and tending to immediate business. My sister and I went about these tasks with great efficiency and purpose. Finally, sometime in the late afternoon, the immediate tasks having been tended to, I had time to think about my dad and my loss, and it started to hit me. When I heard the fear in my dad's voice this morning, when he didn't answer when I tried to call him back, I braced myself for the worst. So it didn't come as a surprise. I took comfort in the fact that he apparently went pretty quickly. He'd been very open this summer about the fact that he was 85 years old and ready to die, and one thing he feared above all else was a slow and incapacitating decline. It's still a shock. He'd spent the past several winters in South Texas, and when he came back this year, he looked better than he had in years. He had good color and high levels of energy. He was very active routing out and painting wooden signs for friends. He purchased a membership in a nearby golf course. He actually golfed several times, something he hadn't done in years. In Texas, he's at the center of a large group of good friends, having breakfast with them every morning at the Port Isabel Whataburger, and enjoying happy hour every afternoon next to his neighbor's trailer. This summer, at the senior complex in Bruce, he made a new group of good friends with whom he had coffee every morning and lunch at 11 o'clock. He's happy and vital to the end, and, as he'd been his entire life, he was funny. He had one setback in early July when he was hospitalized for a week in Eau Claire, a week that the nursing and cleaning and medical staff won't let me forget for a long time, as he entertained them, his shtick in prime form. New audiences had never seen anything like him. At 85 years old, it was his curtain call, his last great audience. He put on the performance of a lifetime, and they all fell in love with him. Even I, who had witnessed these routines countless times over the years, was transfixed and laughed out loud despite myself when, for example, he was talking on his cell phone as one of the nurses took blood, skillfully pricking the tip of his finger, After a couple of minutes, my dad told whoever he was talking to on the phone to hold on for a second. And then with the delivery of master, expressed a sincere but much delayed ouch to the nurse. Despite my better judgment, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. He seemed to recover completely from the hospital, and as I took from doctors' offices to labs, surgeons' offices, he not only seemed to be getting better physically, but was enjoying each visit as an opportunity to repeat his shtick. It was as if he was taking his hospital show on the road. I was amazed when, for what seemed like the 14th time, I heard the same hokey lines about nurses or receptionists being good-looking. Someone would always laugh, not the polite poor old guy trying to be funny laugh, but genuine laughs from deep down, as in, did you hear what this guy said? The routines were extended to his morning coffee group, where he made friends with a very nice old guy who my sister and I would refer to as his sidekick. Every day he'd come to coffee with some wild scheme for him and his sidekick. They were going to go out west and be cowboys. They were going to become astronauts and take a wing off of the space station. Gradually, with each crazy adventure he'd concoct, the attendance of morning coffee grew. After he got home from the hospital, he seemed to regain his strength, going back to work at his sign making and even making out with me for a couple rounds of golf. He was looking forward to returning to Texas this winter. When talking to him, he got the sense of a man at peace with himself. He was ready to die, but until that happened, he was going to enjoy living every moment left. This afternoon, after all the calls were made and things started sinking in, I went to the harbor in Kenosha, near where I live, and stared out at the vast, deep blue of Lake Michigan. This is what, for some unexplained reason, I'm often compelled to do when I get news of this sort. I think I'm not alone. A lot of people, when confronted with grief or tragedy, end up at the seaside. I think it's natural when we lose someone we love to gaze at the sea or the night sky, because our loss, the hole we feel inside, is so large that we need something bigger than ourselves, big enough to contain the enormity of our pain. This is where good old Zeno and his paradox come into play. This is where the infinite lives within the finite. It's the mathematics of loss. The immeasurable and incomprehensible infinity of loss will be visible within a small area occupied by an empty chair tomorrow morning at my dad's senior center, and it exists within the tiniest fragments of my broken heart.
Hello, my name is Bob Katzman, and today I'm going to read a poem about irony, a war, a parent, two cultures, and two countries. I wanted to wear a color that represented each country's flag, and under the circumstances, you'll hear red is the most appropriate. So, sayonara, shalom, goodbye. My father fought the Japanese, born before the Navajos were citizens, before women could vote, before Hirohito, Yamamoto, and Tojo, before Meir, Dayan, and Herzl, before Eisenhower, Patton, and FDR were names on anyone's lips. Packed into trains of troop ships, crossing the Pacific Ocean to avenge Pearl Harbor treachery, to kill people he didn't know. Bombs sending messages by telegraph, he died with steel shrapnel still in his body half a century later. In the Battle of Leyte Gulf, history's great naval engagement, which no one now remembers, my father saw a speck in the sky. The speck became a Japanese kamikaze plane, a suicide flight loaded with bombs, aimed directly for his ship. Missing by inches, my father saw the pilot's smiling face as his doomed plane dove beneath the sea. What do you do with your life after that? That war was the peak of his life, his Mount Fuji of drama, terror, and bravery. Nothing could match it. A life stretching out flat as the American prairies, never finding the right work, the right girl, the right life. I have a tattered Japanese battlefield flag he saved for an unborn son. But life turns unexpected corners. His curious son, born on the 5th anniversary of Adolf Hitler's death, wanted to know everything about the Japanese and the Jews. Who they were, who was I? Though Jews remain merely a sliver in numbers compared to the 100 million Japanese. I discovered we were both Asian peoples. Where else would Israel be? Parked near the center of Asia. the crossroads of history's armies. Japan, an island surrounded by ocean, nearly 6,000 miles from Jerusalem to Tokyo, yet we were both Asian. Both dark-eyed, dark-haired people, smaller in stature than many others. Both our alphabets written right to left. Both languages spoken exactly as written, so unlike incomprehensible French. I wanted to know everything, both so creative within their limitations. The Japanese trapped on their island, the Jews landless and roaming, both wrote everything down, ink more precious than gold, so similar in capturing ideas, both sealing time on scrolls. I learned about our architects and artists, both creating imaginative buildings in wood, stone, and glass, both creating delicate watercolors, music central to both of us, in tragic opera and magic Broadway, about matzo ball and miso soup, brisket and teriyaki. I wanted to be a cowboy. Then saw a book about the samurai, warriors as works of art, war as ritual and honor, 1,000 years of Japan's dance of death, their helmets, their armor, their swords, leaving Roy Rogers and John Wayne, their Winchesters and their Colts in the dust. Samurais, wow. My father watched me learning, sending me to art school, private school, prizing education over anything else. Listening proudly to all I learned, I listened to his stories of war, of his parents' dangerous escape from Europe, of being one out of many, and the very real dangers of, even here, of being just one out of so many. He was confounded by my alternate life of music and art and books, watching me acquire understanding of history's flow and our determined place in it, living in a way as a witness that another life was possible, even if not for him. He protected me and paved my way. When he died in my arms, Hirohito, Yamamoto, and Tojo, Meir, Dayan, and Herzl, Eisenhower, Patton, and FDR were no longer names on anyone's lips, fame swiftly disappearing in the flow, but he knew I would remember, not as warrior, but as student, preserving history's past. To my father Israel, wherever and whatever you are now, perhaps floating cosmic energy, somewhere in the universe, I so hope you found the peace and tranquility you never found on Earth. Arigato, toda raba, thank you. Sayonara, shalom. Sayonara, shalom, goodbye. Thank you.
I'm Darleen Coleman, and I'm going to read the opening to a short story I wrote called Something to Cry About. Imagine this, a barely devoured sliver of pineapple stuck in your throat like a barnacle plastered on a ship's side. Its acid eroding the surface, causing a sensation of something being where it doesn't belong, of damage occurring. You feel the craving, the anticipation, the seductively sweet taste of it in your mouth. Then you swallow, and it becomes something else, something you hadn't bargained for, another thing gone wrong. Teresa Wojcik grew up an only child in a household ruled by an iron-fisted, truck-driving tyrant, and a mother wholly dependent on God to get her through the day. She can still hear the pacing of her dad's heavy work shoes across the linoleum, punctuated by the slam of the back door as he left for work at dawn. Can still see her mother's rosary perpetually slung around her wrist as she sat rocking, lips barely moving. Most people cringe when doors are slammed, but Teresa, at 31, still breathes an involuntary sigh of relief at the sound. Dinner was always the worst time of day. "Teresa!" her father would shout after some grave infraction, eating too fast, pushing food she didn't like around on her plate, mixing corn into her mashed potatoes. Hot tears would roll down her cheeks, plop onto the vinyl tablecloth. If she didn't stop, he'd stand, and touched both hands to his belt like a cowboy fingering his holster. Stop that crying right now, or I'll give you something to really cry about. If she took small sips of her milk and alternated breathing with swallowing, she found she could muster some control. Named after Saint Teresa, patron saint of lace makers and headaches, she was sent to Catholic school where she learned the difference between mortal and venial sins, and that her first name had 3 syllables, not 2. She was maybe 9 when she realized she'd never live up to her saintly name and decided to call herself Terry. She announced it proudly at dinner one night. She purposely picked a night they were having pork chops, her father's favorite. There was silence after she spoke, and she thought maybe they hadn't heard, so she repeated it. I want to be called Terry from now on. She started to tell them most kids in her school had nicknames. But her father rose, banged his hands on the table, and shoved his chair with such force it tipped over his plate and food fell all over the floor. She remembers trying to catch the peas as they rolled under the table in every direction. She was stooping to pick one up when she heard the thunder of her father's shoes back across the kitchen floor. She waited, eyes wide, for the yelling. It took a moment before she realized his vitriol wasn't directed at her this time, but at her mother. Teresa quietly backed out of the kitchen, went to her room, carefully said 3 Hail Marys, then took her safety scissors and cut all the hair off of her favorite Barbie.
Hi, I'm Marshall Smith, and I'm going to read a poem I wrote about my father. It's called Clouds. Clouds. The east is the color of blue-edged bone. Clouds pour across the sky. My father sits up weary, reading Robert Louis Stevenson all night, smoking Panama cigars, dreaming. His eyes drift back like clouds across the field of the page. He dreams of stalking elephants in steaming African jungles, coral snakes like springs on the arms of trees. He dreams of chestnuts scattered like children on Oklahoma lawns, red earth flaming at sunset, stars falling through his childhood. He recalls the half moon of a woman's shoulder sinking back into the grass. He dreams of sailing alone around the world, one small stone deep into his hand, and he dreams of mirrors on the walls of French restaurants where he saw himself once, frozen for a moment in a white shirt. He goes to work sleepless the day of this morning, drags a worn brown briefcase aboard a train, rushes from the blurred platform where it seems for a moment he still stands watching the blur of the train. From a tall office window, he looks out across the lake to where there used to be pirates, where there used to be an island, and he lights a cigar and lets clouds sail from his lips. Below his feet, the Chicago River is green. This poem is called Accident. It's about the suicide of my mother. Accident. He found her in the car on his way in. Doris was there, dead, the sound of life like the click of a pistol. He left the residual fumes of car exhaust, scuffled into the house to pick up a phone, pausing to dial. The evening waited, already darkening. The kitchen blew cold. The floor creaked. A squirrel on the stoop struggled with a peanut. The table was set for dinner.
Hello, my name is Joe Engel, and I'm going to read you a poem called A Walk Through Sand at Night. Do you remember the tracks we made across the dunes near midnight? There was a charge between us, powered purely off hesitation. The air down there had a late summer scent of salmon washed onto the beach, almost sweet. We talked low as the warm breeze rushing through the reeds, seriously, of your father. It seemed he and I both read into things, as if every situation contained a question, right? The moon was pulled, burning slowly over Lake Michigan, dredged from water by the sky, while you waited for me to bend down and bring us both new answers. I didn't. But you saw me there, shiver in the movie blue moonlight, my heart like an engine, right? So now I see that empty midnight beach as the echo of your receding, as that moon, clueless, rolls toward the other horizon.
Thank you, audience, for listening. Please like our Facebook page and visit our website, KenoshaWritersGuild.com, to see what all we do and how you can participate. Until next time, I'm Marshall Smith. This is the Kenosha Writers Guild.